Hello and welcome to the Apps Associates webinar, a journey from EBS to Cloud ERP, HCM, and SCM. It's now my pleasure to hand you over to our speaker for today, Todd Ledet. Todd, over to you.
Thank you, Julian. Today we're going to be talking about my experience from moving from EBS to the cloud and talk about some practical experiences that we've had at Apps Associates while doing this, as well as talking about some of the challenges that you have as you go through there. What we're going to do today is we're going to go over this agenda. We're going to talk about who I am and who Apps Associate is, and we're going to talk about my client's transition to the cloud, what their history was and why that's relevant. And then we're going to talk about the benefits of the cloud. And then we're going to talk about some of the things that we experienced during the project and what we did about them and how you can address them before you go into this. And then we're going to talk about how you can be successful at this implementation. First of all, my name is Todd Ledet. I'm a practice manager here at Apps Associates for Cloud ERP. My background is in accounting, but I also have experience implementing Cloud HCM and the Cloud CX products. So I'll get into a little bit more about my experience here in just a second. First, I want to talk about is Apps Associates, and one of the things that I like to point out when we're talking about Apps Associates is our long-term focus on our customers. Up in the top right-hand corner of the slide, we have 30 customers with 5 to 10 years relationship with Apps Associates. At the end of the day, Apps Associates wants to be there to help you through your business and be part of your successes. Also, I like to talk about how Apps is a full gambit of products for an implementation partner, from business applications, analytics, to the product development, to integration, and into cloud infrastructure and services. One of the last things I like to talk about Apps Associates is how we've set up our cloud organization. A lot of people think that EBS and cloud are the same, and so they'll put EBS consultants on a cloud project and do that. We do not do that. We have a separate cloud practice where we train and get certifications for cloud consultants so that they can address your needs better. EBS and cloud is different than each other, and it's very important that that has an understanding when you're doing your cloud implementation. All right. Let's talk about myself. I am a practice manager for Cloud ERP at Apps Associates. I've been implementing cloud for over 7 years. I implemented one of the first Cloud ERP implementation projects ever. I know I was at the first training session at the Oracle offices in California. I've also been implementing Oracle products for over 15 years. I am a certified Scrum Master, which will be important when we talk about this project in just a few minutes. And I also was a controller for a long time, where I was on the other side of the fence, where I had to use implementation partners. I had to update our system from QuickBooks into a mid-tier solution to a customized solution. At the end of the day, I have been a project manager for over 200 projects in the Oracle cloud infrastructure and their on-premise. There's a few philosophies that I have when discussing a project, and it's critical that we go over them because it's going to talk to you about how we were successful at the project we're going to discuss in a few minutes. One of the things is that the system runs the business and people run the system. So it's very important that we get your solution set up correctly, and that you know how to run the system, and that stuff is automatic, and you're not coming in and having to come up with custom solutions or having to come in and do manual processes, because that's very inefficient. And we want you to focus on making decisions and doing other things than trying to come up with workarounds. Another thing is we want to keep it simple. You guys have heard of the KISS methodology, keep it simple, stupid. And one of the unique solutions that I like to talk about, to highlight this is we had a client where they wanted to do a project very, very quickly. And we said, okay, what we need you to do is we need you to listen to us. You need to use the system the way it was designed. You need to use industry best practices and not stray from those, and just implement it the way that it's intended to. So we tell that to all of our clients, and these guys actually took it to heart and did exactly what we said and implemented it in the way that we suggested. What ended up happening is we were able to go live 2 weeks early on a 12-week project, and we were able to come significantly under budget due to keeping it as simple as possible. The next thing that is very, very critical is that you guys are not unique. Your products may be unique, your sales process may be unique, but at the end of the day, your systems do not need to be unique to match that. And sometimes it's a very difficult conversation to have. Accounting is accounting, and doing your costing and recording your financial statements and doing those types of things are very, very, very standard, and that you shouldn't have to stray too much from industry best practices. Which leads us into being standard, using standard business processes. Oracle has a website dedicated to the standardization that they've implemented into the cloud, and it's very, very important that you look at those things, because you want to keep things running and processing as smoothly as possible for your audits, for your own internal processes. The next thing is that once we get done with an implementation, your journey in your ERP is just beginning. Basically saying that you're not done with your business systems after implementation. You can't just set it and forget it. What you have to do is your business processes are going to change over the years. And what we've experienced in other projects, and I've seen this in a lot of clients that we've been into, is that the reason that they're going to a new system is their business processes have changed so significantly their current system can't handle it. Our whole job is to make sure that we set it up in a way that you can add to your processes, not be handcuffed by them. And the last thing is, what is measured is managed. And what we mean by that is we want to measure the success of your system, and making sure that we do that and highlighting those things will help you to manage it in the future. So we'll give you some ways of managing your system that will help you in the future and manage your whole business process from stem to stern. Let's talk about the transition to cloud. The client that we had, they implemented EBS in 1994, which is a long time ago as far as technology is concerned. They have managed their own implementation since that time. They've had consultants come into their organization 3 times. Their initial EBS implementation, a couple months, about 10 years ago, for some functionality they just didn't have time to implement, and then apps associates to move to the cloud. Now we've talked about this as far as standardization and things like that. One of the things that has happened is their business processes have changed since 1994 significantly. One of the challenges that they had is, since they were managing their own EBS implementation, is that they could implement business processes based on the availability of their IT department, which kind of handcuffed them a little bit, because implementing EBS functionality takes a significant amount of time. And so what happened is they had to make business decisions about what they were and were not going to implement. And what came from that is they had a lot of workaround processes because they couldn't fully implement what they needed to do. So you get kind of a sense of how this organization was running and what they were doing. Let's talk about their footprint. Their footprint is huge. What we did on the cloud side of things is we implemented all of finance, including expenses and tax and advanced collections, purchasing, inventory and bills of material, order management, project financials, contract billing, revenue management, HCM, FCCS, which is the financial consolidation and cloud services, and also the account reconciliation cloud service, and planning and budgeting cloud service, which is the Hyperion product that is now in the cloud, and then all the reporting tools that we need to. So you can see this is a very, very large footprint that we're implementing. Now, what we had to do on this project is very interesting. We're going to talk about the project specifically. One of the things that, first of all, that happened was that they were able to see significant price reductions from their maintenance and to their licensing costs. So they had a very much benefits of getting lower cost of ownership. Also, they're taking advantage of an integrated cloud-based system. We're going to talk about integrations and some of their custom programs that they had to build in order to do some of the stuff they needed, and how this integrated cloud-based system allowed them to get rid of some of those things. Also, we talked about their business had changed over the years, so this was their change management opportunity to update their current processes and drive some standardization. Also, they wanted to improve the end-user system experience. If you've been on EBS, you know that there's a lot of Java issues that you have when you're doing on-prem solution, and how, you know, just managing and maintaining those things can take some time, and end users' ability to get into the system and not have an IT department supporting them constantly can be a challenge. Also, one of the things is they wanted to leverage the cloud technical architecture. So platform as a service was implemented as well, so that they could do some of the integrations and some of the things that they needed to do to integrate into cloud, right, in the cloud technical architecture. And last but not least, and we just talked about this, remove as many integrations as possible. We were able to do this with some of the standard functionality out of the box that's not in EBS. They made some process changes that made some of their integrations obsolete. But at the end of the day, they still had to do some integrations, and we helped them through that. So some of the project considerations. The first thing is how we manage it and operated this project. One of the critical factors on this project is they did not want us to implement this project ourselves from an apps associate's perspective. They wanted us to get them to a testing environment, and they would take over the implementation from there. And the reason being is you saw that they took over their EBS implementation. They wanted to run their own cloud implementation as well. So from our perspective, running a project where we're not taking the client to go live is very foreign to a lot of companies, and it was to us. But one of the things that we had to do is we had to change the way we managed the project in order to take advantage of this new way of implementing for this client. The first thing is the project structure. We implemented this project in an agile format, and it was very critical that we did that because we were able to be flexible in how we did this implementation, and it also switched ownership to the client's users very, very quickly. Instead of the consultants taking on all of the responsibility, it helped highlight what those responsibilities were and push the ownership over to the client at the appropriate time. Another thing that was very, very critical is the client PM managed the project from the get-go. And I was the PM from an apps associate's perspective, and I became their advisor, but I made sure that they set up the meetings, they managed all the team members and the functionality. And the reason that we did that is because we were moving very quickly, and we were, like I said, we were just configuring up to the test environment, and they were taking over. One of the things we didn't want to have to do is have a transition from me being a PM to the client PM. We wanted it to be consistent all the way through the project, and it really helped manage the project a lot better. Another thing that was very critical, and we've talked about this a little bit, is that we transitioned the functionality to the client very, very quickly. And this is something that I was very, very on top of, because when you have to take over a new environment, you have to learn all the ins and outs. Now, one of the things that I told the client was, hey guys, I know this looks a lot like EBS. I know that some of the structures are very much like EBS, but at the end of the day, this is not EBS. And this goes into the bottom point here, this having open and honest conversations. So I had an open and honest conversation with them about, hey, you guys, there's a lot of functionality that you think is there that's not going to be there. There's some new functionality that's not in an EBS that is going to be there, that's going to be a benefit. And so I told them this, and they agreed with me, but until they got into a situation where they saw the realities of what that was, they didn't quite fully understand that. And then once they did, it kind of even helped switch the project a little bit as well. But I cannot stress enough when we're in a implementation situation about having these open and honest relationship conversations between project managers. We had some very difficult conversations, but what we did is we got them out often and early, and we were able to deal with them and change the way we need to implement based on these conversations, and the Agile methodology helped facilitate that as well. So we just talked about this. Cloud ERP is similar to EBS, but it is not EBS. Cloud ERP has a lot of new functionality that's not in EBS, you know, what you would expect. And the last thing is some of the EBS functionality that you're used to in EBS is not in cloud. Doesn't say it won't be in cloud eventually, but there are some things that are just different than EBS, and the functionality that you may have used in EBS may or may not be there. And like I said, this is something until you get into the situation and you see it and you experience it, you can't really fully understand. It sounds pretty straightforward, but until you get into the middle of it. And we had some stuff the first week while I was on site about some of the assumptions that they had about some of the functionality in cloud that was there. You know, as a general overview, it was correct, but in some specific areas it was not. And so we were able to have those conversations right up front at the beginning of the project. Now, we talked about this is a good opportunity for change management. What we try to tell them as we go through the requirements process is, let's talk about industry best practices. You guys do it like this. Why do you do it like this? Here's a good opportunity to challenge you guys and say, why do you do it that way? Is it just because you've been doing it that way for so long? Or is it because you really have a business need for it? So we talk through those things. And a lot of times, I would say over 60%, it's because they've been doing it that way for so long and that they don't know of any other way of doing it. So once again, when we're implementing this, even going from EBS to Cloud ERP, it is a great opportunity to kind of standardize and simplify some of your processes. We also talked about how the client was kind of handcuffed by their IT department about being able to implement new functionality. Now, in Cloud ERP, it is much simpler to implement new modules and new functionality. It's a configuration process. It's not as difficult. There's a lot of things that are similar to doing the EBS implementation of different modules, but it's a lot easier to implement. And we were able to take advantage of some of those things. That our client really wanted to implement contract billing. They just hadn't been able to do it. If you know contract billing, it touches a lot of different modules in Oracle's ERP. So we were able to implement that functionality that they've been missing for so long. One of the biggest conversations that we had with this client is, hey, you know, if you want to, you know, do some of the costing things, you need to change how you do your time entry. You need to, you know, put projects in there so that you can track the proper costs and do that. So as we were going through that, they're like, oh, we're going to have to change the way our whole organization enters time. Absolutely you are. And so what we determined is that organization was not ready for that change. And it was really important for them that they didn't change time entry. So we determined, okay, here's the risks, here's what you can and can't do about tracking costs, and they were okay with it because their organization could just not handle that change. It's very important that you know your organization and what you can and cannot implement if it's going to cause too much of a distraction or a problem with people's daily lives. And so they determined not to implement some functionality that they originally thought they were going to be able to do. Data conversion. Now, data conversions is a little bit easier if you're moving from EBS to cloud. There's still some challenges because it's data. One of the things that we're able to do is we do have scripts that we can pull. We can go into your EBS environment and pull the data out and put it into the cloud import templates. Now, that doesn't mean there's still not any manual intervention that needs to happen. One of the things that happens when we do this switch from EBS to cloud is it's a good opportunity if you need to change your chart of accounts to change your chart of accounts. And I would say, 9 times out of 10 people change their chart of accounts when they move from EBS to cloud. Now, one of the things that has an effect that has on the data conversion is you have to do mapping from your old chart to your new chart. So that's usually one of the manual steps that are needed to be done. Now, if there's a logical conclusion, if it's in this account and it would go to this account in the new system, we can do that as part of our scripts. But there's still some things that have to be done differently because some of the table structures in cloud are different than EBS, and there's a few more steps that you have to go through in order to get data into the system. One of the biggest challenges that the client had is they thought it was going to be pretty easy to do this. Now, one of the things that you may or may not know is in cloud you do not have direct access to the tables in the system. You can import data using import templates or using web services and APIs to get the stuff in and out of the table structure, but you don't have the ability to basically run SQL statements on the database. And so one of the things that they underestimated is the amount of time it was going to take to understand how to get data in and out of the system. And so we worked with them and got them up to speed, but it was something that they struggled with. Another thing in the cloud environment is that you have a new technical environment, and they had to learn it. And so we had resources there for them to learn it. Now, what we had to do in order to make this effective is it wasn't just, hey, we're going to sit down and lecture you on how the new technical environment is. We had to have some practical integrations to do so that they could struggle a little bit so they could actually learn how it interacted back and forth. They were much more effective when they had an integration that they were working on and how the new technical architecture worked. That really resonated really well with them. Another thing that happened at this time is they had an opportunity to evaluate their current integrations. And what they did is they got rid of at least 80% of their current integrations because of some of it was new functionality that existed in the cloud and they didn't have to do those integrations anymore. A lot of them were, hey, we're changing our business processes and we don't need this anymore. Because Oracle Cloud ERP is a fully integrated system, this stuff we don't need to do because it's already built into the cloud infrastructure. Also, we needed a lot of time for knowledge transfer and giving them resources and ability to ask us questions throughout the whole process. One of the last things is anytime you transition a technical architecture, it's going to be a challenge. There's going to be things that are, that people are going to struggle with. And from our perspective, we knew that going in. We talked to them about it, but we were able to, have good conversations and be able to support them through this process and learning this new infrastructure. So the keys to successful implementation are a lot of things that you've already heard as we've gone through what our client went through and why they're so critical. But it's kind of summarizing, why we were successful and how you can be successful in an EBS to cloud implementation. Remember to keep it simple. We talked about if the simpler you keep it, the easier it is going to be to implement it and for your organization to absorb the new change. We try to get people to use Cloud ERP the way it's designed, using industry best practices. Now, at the end of the day, you have processes that may or may not fit into there, and you have reasons for it, and we work with you and give you solutions for that, but we really try to push making sure that you use it as it's designed if possible. Another thing, determine how much change your organization can absorb. That's very critical in a project of these sizes, is that if you as an organization can't support us as an implementation partner, then we're not going to be as successful as we want to be. Another thing is you as a client need to take ownership of the implementation early and often. What we've found in the past, when people take ownership of the implementation at go live, they have a huge learning curve during their go live process. If they take ownership during the testing cycles where they're involved in running processes, when they go live, the struggle that they have is not as intense as it is if they just take it at go live. So very important that you are involved and that you take ownership of the project. Another thing that's very critical is making sure that there's business alignment, that you have a project sponsor, that there's an executive communicating to your organization that, hey, this is important, here's the reasons why, and this is why we're doing it. People ask me a lot, what are the two reasons that projects fail? And I say the first one's data, that you don't have a handle on your data and it's not clean. And the other one is end user adoption and the communication of the project. If your executives support the project and communicate it to the team, end user adoption magically goes up significantly. If there's no one driving this project from an executive position, then the project has some struggles usually. And another thing, we talked about data, start it as early as possible. We try to give people the templates the first week that we're on the project so they can start getting accustomed to it. And within 2 or 3 weeks, we're working with them to get their data to us so that we can start testing and validating it. And the last thing is you have to be open and honest in a project. Personalities don't mix, then you need to get that out early. If you don't feel like we are understanding what you're saying, then you got to tell us. Vice versa, if we don't feel like you understand what we're telling you, we try to bring those things up. It's very critical for a successful project, no matter what it is, to have that form of communication. I want to thank everybody for listening today. This concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.